Welcome, everyone, to our Packers News live chat alongside Ryan Wood. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers hit the field today, gearing up to Sunday's home opener at Lambeau Field against the Detroit Lions. We'll bring you the latest on defensive lineman Kenny Clark's groin injury. We'll talk a little bit about the battered offensive line. And then, as always, we want to hear from you. So if you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question, leave us a comment. Ryan and I will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. Packers defensive lineman Kenny Clark did not practice today as he's suffering through a groin injury that he sustained in Sunday's game against the Minnesota Vikings. Not only is Clark a massive part of this Packers run defense, he's also a really big part of their pass rush as well. And if he's not available for Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions, he's going to be missed sorely. Last year in 2019, Clark put up 6 sacks. That was third highest on the team. How will the Packers attempt to replace Clark if he's not healthy on Sunday?
Well, it remains to be seen. They went with a lot of Kingsley Keke. They went a lot with Tyler Lancaster, who is a run-stopping defensive lineman, and obviously Dean Lowry was also getting his regular snaps. He wasn't out there today, and until we see him out there, it's not going to look good. It doesn't look good until it looks good, right? It looks good when he gets on the field. So they brought in perhaps some reinforcements to the practice squad today. Remember, you can elevate 2 guys midweek, but we'll just have to see. You know, Kenny Clark said that he told WDUZ tonight on his show that his foot slipped inside US Bank Stadium. He pulled his groin, and he doesn't have a timetable. So the fact that he wasn't out there today, if he can't get out there tomorrow in pads, Sunday can certainly be in question.
Clark isn't the only defensive lineman dealing with an injury right now. Montravius Adams is also dealing with an injury. He's been suffering through a right toe injury for the last nearly a month now. With Adams practicing today in a limited capacity, there is some optimism that he may be able to return closer to Sunday's game. However, with Adams currently dealing with the toe and Clark not practicing, the Packers are thin at defensive line. As a result, they decided to add on defensive lineman Billy Wynn, who's a 9-year NFL veteran, to the practice squad. Ryan, we typically would not be sitting here talking about practice squad players. However, as you mentioned, the Packers are able to elevate 2 practice squad players to the active roster on game day in 2020 only. Ryan, what did the Packers see in Wynn to warrant a signing?
He's a guy that's played a fair amount of football. You know, he's an 8th-year player. He was originally drafted in the 6th round out of the Cleveland Browns back in 2012, and you know he's played in this league. He had injuries. He had a triceps injury. He tore his ACL that really cost him the bulk of 3 seasons. So it's very rare that you hear of a guy that's an 8th-year player who's even eligible for the practice squad. That's why. But they need bodies, and that's what Billy Wynn gives them, is a big body, 305 pounds, that can perhaps rotate in if called upon this week to elevate. He's not going to be a game changer, a lifesaver for defensive coordinator Mike Pettin, but this is a defensive line that does need the depth and sorely needs the bodies, especially if Kenny Clark is not able to play against the Lions.
Moving on to some positive injury news. Packers right tackle Billy Turner returned to practice today after missing Sunday's game against the Vikings with a right knee injury. Both Elton Jenkins and Rick Wagner took snaps at right tackle in place of typical starter Turner. Turner practiced in a limited capacity today, so he's not entirely healthy. With that in mind, Ryan, what do the Packers do if Turner isn't healthy? Who do they put in at right tackle to start?
Well, Matt LaFleur is very complimentary today of Rick Wagner. He had the elbow injury that he missed about half of camp with, but he was able to come back and the end of camp, and then he didn't start Sunday in Minnesota, but he played well. And really everyone that played on the offensive line on Sunday played well. No sacks, minimal pressures for Aaron Rodgers. So you've still got the 2 questions. It's not just right tackle, but we know Lane Taylor's out for the year with a torn ACL. Lucas Patrick did practice today, but he's got the shoulder. So we'll have to see if Billy Turner's able to go, if Lucas Patrick's able to go. If neither are, you could be looking at Rick Wagner and John Runyon again. And John Runyon will get more than 15 snaps this time. If Lucas Patrick's able to go and Billy Turner isn't, he's your right guard. Rick Wagner is right tackle. So offensive line, Olivia, it's going to be musical chairs for a while for this team, especially with the injuries. And it might have been that way even without injuries, because you got the sense that it was still very much a potential open competition going into the season. So you got the competition on the right side, plus now the injuries. It's going to be some revolving doors there.
As you mentioned, Ryan, both Lane Taylor and Lucas Patrick left the game early on Sunday with different injuries. Lane Taylor with the season-ending ACL injury and Lucas Patrick with a shoulder injury. Despite all of that turnover, the offensive line played really well. They didn't allow a single sack, and they only allowed 2 quarterback hits on Aaron Rodgers. How was that group able to be so cohesive and consistent throughout the entire game?
Danielle Hunter not playing is a big part of it, and Yannick Ngakoue had been there for about 5 minutes. So certainly it's going to be a different Vikings defensive front when they meet again later this season. That can't be forgotten, as they were not playing their full force. With that said, they played really well, and it was about the worst-case scenario. I mean, short of David Bakhtiari having an injury, it was about the worst-case scenario you could have. Fortunately for them, obviously, Bakhtiari's perfectly fine. So it was impressive. The production alone was impressive. You add in the fact that they had so much adversity hit them during the game. Think of John Runyon. He entered week 1 with very minimal chance that he'd possibly see a snap on the field during offense. A lot had to go wrong for that to happen, and it all went wrong, and it happened, and he has no heads up whatsoever. There's no forewarning. It's an injury situation, so surprise, you're on the field. And to his credit, kind of like the son of a longtime NFL veteran you'd expect, he was ready to go as a rookie. He was ready to go. He only played about 15 snaps, but they were good snaps. He was on the field for that last touchdown run from Aaron Jones. You didn't notice – I don't know about you. I didn't notice John Runyon at right guard, and that's a really good thing. If you're a lineman, you don't get noticed. So that's just – it's next man up, and they were able to do that.
As you mentioned, Ryan, Runyon played really well. The group as a whole played really well in Sunday's game against the Vikings. We'll keep you posted throughout the week as we learn a little bit more about the injury statuses of Billy Turner, Lucas Patrick, gearing up for Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions. Let's move over to our lovely viewers over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. We're taking questions from all 3 platforms today, so if you have a question, let's hear it from you. Let's go with Matthew. Matthew, thank you for joining us once again today. Matthew says Packers are going to need some help in stopping the Detroit Lions, especially with their running back weapon, Adrian Peterson, who Christian Kirksey spoke very highly of. Jerry Montgomery said he has drinking from the fountain of youth throughout his career. How challenging is the Detroit Lions run game going to be for the Packers, who struggled against the run against the Vikings?
Adrian Peterson's a Hall of Famer first ballot. So, yeah, it's not going to be the easiest. Here's the thing, though. Dalvin Cook is better, and they just did really well against Dalvin Cook. So it's something that we'll have to see. I mean, one good game for this run defense does not a new reputation make, not after last season. So it's wait and see. But one game in, so far so good. It's just a matter now of, can they do it again?
It's a good question. Thank you, Matthew, for your question. Let's move on to Peter, who asks, we hear a lot about Matt LaFleur and his offense marrying the run with the pass. Could we give us an example of when that happened and worked on Sunday? Head coach Matt LaFleur uses a lot of different buzzwords, buzz phrases, marrying the run and the pass, the illusion of complexity. The list goes on, Ryan. When did that idea of marrying the run with the pass come to fruition in Sunday's game against the Vikings?
Well, think of it more conceptually instead of one play that comes to mind. You saw at the beginning that first drive even, you saw Tyler Ervin on a jet motion, horizontal. You saw Alan Lazard on an end-around type jet motion, horizontal. And then down in the red zone, it didn't get many yards, but you saw Jamal Williams on a jet motion, horizontal. So there was so much side-to-side movement early in that game, and it was really forcing the Vikings to cover sideline to sideline and to really spread out and cover a large portion of the field. And once they spread them out, that's when they started to hit vertical. So just think of it in shapes. I mean, that's how football works. It's geometry on the field. The horizontal came before the vertical, and that's running to set up the pass. And once they got them spread out, they hit them with some deep balls, and they've got a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that can do that. And that's another idea also of how Matt LaFleur wants to use that running game to make life easier for the quarterback. We saw that, the greatest example in this offense might be the late 90s with the Denver Broncos and John Elway and Terrell Davis. Same offense, same concept. That's what they're trying to mirror here in Green Bay. They've got another Hall of Fame quarterback, make his life easier in his late 30s by using that running game to soften the defense horizontally and then go deep. That's what they did.
Peter, we do hear that phrase a lot, marrying the run game with the passing game from head coach Matt LaFleur. And on Sunday, we got to see a little bit of that in action as the Packers are getting a little bit more comfortable in year 2 of Matt LaFleur's offense. Thank you for your question, Peter. Let's take a question from somebody else. We have a question here about Aaron Jones that I just lost, of course, as always. Love that there are so many of you asking questions in here because that means I can't, so much is moving on. Well, let's start with, here we go. Matthew was talking about Aaron Jones. Okay, so Matthew asked what happened to Aaron Jones in Sunday's game against the Vikings. He hopes that the Packers let him loose on the field against the Lions. Aaron Jones was playing against a very crowded box. The Vikings defense was anticipating the Packers running the ball quite a bit this past Sunday. As a result, when Aaron Jones wasn't given the ball, the Packers had some options in receivers, including Devontae Adams. How did the run game kind of balance with the passing game this past weekend?
Yeah, Matthew, I don't know exactly what you mean by what happened to Aaron Jones. He had 20 touches, which last year in the opener against Chicago, he had 14 touches. It was a substantial, larger workload for Aaron Jones. His 16 carries, second most on the team, was 7. This was not a split type running back. They used their depth, but it was not a split running back by committee. He was the lead back. And it was interesting to me because that 20 touches in September, there was a time we would never, ever see that. And so they're already starting with him, and it's the way it's going to be. They're going to increase his workload throughout the course of the season, and we know that because they want him to be at his best in the most important stretch, the stretch run for the playoffs. However, they're starting at 20 touches. They're not exactly taking it easy in the early going. I don't know. I think that for game 1, it was a pretty substantial workload.
Aaron Jones, don't worry about him. I'm pretty sure head coach Matt LaFleur will be involving him more and more in the offense as the season goes on. Thank you, Matthew, for your question. Let's take a question here from Periscope. Was Equinemius St. Brown, wide receiver, a healthy scratch on Sunday? If so, are the Packers looking to make a change there? Equinemius St. Brown was listed on the injury report today with a knee injury. He's been battling through some things throughout training camp. We don't know exactly if it was related to the knee because there was no injury report during training camp. However, now we do know that he has a knee injury. Ryan, what is there to expect with this timeline with Equinemius St. Brown right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's unfortunate for him because it's a situation where not only did he miss the time last year, he's trying to work himself back from that, but now you want him to stay healthy. You want him to be able to have that opportunity. So it's hard to say how long that will take. He was limited today in practice with the knee. But even if he was healthy, the reality for him is it's going to take some time. And he's a young receiver. He's a late round pick, and he missed his entire second season. So it's going to take him some time to work that rust off, and that's a major detriment to a young guy's development, especially a late round pick. So, if you would have asked me a week ago, will it be Equinemius St. Brown or Malik Taylor, I would have said Equinemius St. Brown is going to be on the 53. But it wasn't a major surprise just because of all even with the injury, all the uphill climb that he's had.
It's disappointing for the Packers that he wasn't able to come out and make an impact on the offense right away after spending all of last season on IR with an ankle injury. We'll keep you updated as practice continues this week, and we'll let you know if he's able to come back and practice in a full capacity at some point before Sunday's game against the Lions. All right, let's take another question here. Let's go to Robin. Robin asks, Olivia and Ryan, that's us, Ryan. How was it to be in the Vikings stadium with no fans? It was a different experience. We were able to park closer to the stadium because there were no fans tailgating at the stadium.
Sorry.
Big takeaway number one. And then number two, it was pretty quiet inside of the stadium, Ryan. You told head coach Matt LaFleur this when he was speaking to the media today. You were surprised about how quiet it was inside of US Bank Stadium. And honestly, so was I. I was anticipating needing earplugs. I brought earplugs and I didn't use them. Ryan, what was your experience like at US Bank Stadium?
It was surprising. And it was surprising to the Packers too, because Matt LaFleur indicated today he's going to take the Packers back into Lambeau Field this week for another practice because it was louder during practices at Lambeau Field when they had their scrimmage than at US Bank Stadium. And that, as someone who was there at both, I can completely vouch for that. It was louder at Lambeau Field. So there was something off with the noise volume at one place or the other, because my ear doesn't recognize 70 decibels. I don't know what that's like, but one of those places was not 70 decibels. Let's just put it that way. And I was curious how it sounded on the field, Olivia, because up in the press box, you're right, we didn't hear it. I mean, I could barely hear the ambient noise, and it was only if you really listened to it. It was basically quiet, and I expected the visual to be stunning, the sea of purple seats, just an empty stadium. I mean, I knew that we'd see that, and that would be weird, but it was really the quiet that was most jarring to me. It was the audible, what you can hear or I guess not hear, that I didn't expect. It sounds like we're not alone in that, because the Packers are in the same boat, and something that's going to take some time to get used to. I don't think any of us are going to be used to it in one game. It's going to take a few weeks at the very least to get used to that.
As strange as the environment was in US Bank Stadium, I cannot even imagine what it's going to be like inside of Lambeau Field without any fans inside of the Packers home stadium. I'm not mentally prepared. I should get mentally prepared because I have to be. We're going to be there in just a few days, Ryan. Yeah. Thank you, Robin, for the question. Michael asks, I suppose first he exclaims, amazing block from Josiah DeGuarra, the Packers rookie tight end. Do you think he will be getting more playing time this week? If you don't recall exactly what block Michael's talking about here, DeGuarra launched himself into the air as sort of a human bowling ball on a run by wide receiver Allen Lazard, actually. And DeGuarra took out two Vikings defenders. When I asked him about this the other day, he said that it was purely a reactionary decision to sort of lower his shoulder into the defender and use one of the Vikings defenders to take out the other one. What does his performance, especially on that play, say about the type of player he is and can be for this Packers offense?
Well, it shows that he's not just a camp wonder. He's not just a book-smart guy that has this coach's trust because he knows the plays. He can actually go out there on the field and execute and be a playmaker, and that's what he was on Sunday. I thought it was interesting. It was Davante Adams today that was talking about Jair Alexander, and bear with me, it'll come back to Josiah DeGuarra, but he was asked basically what he thought of Jair Alexander, and Davante Adams said that very early on, his very first camp, he knew Jair Alexander was different because Davante Adams beat Jair Alexander on a rep, just as you'd expect. He was Davante Adams. Jair Alexander was a first-round pick, but he was a rookie. And that happens all the time, and veterans beat rookies all the time. And when Davante Adams went back into the locker room, he saw Jair Alexander scrolling through his clips from practice over and over and over again because he was not ready to cede the rep. He wanted to figure out what exactly went wrong so that it wouldn't happen again. Whether or not he was going against Davante Adams did not matter to him. He did something wrong, he got beat, he wanted to fix it. And then at the end of that, Davante Adams said, Jair Alexander has a rare kind of focus, and you see it on the practice field, and Josiah DeGuarra has that same kind of focus. I thought it was really high praise to just kind of randomly lump Josiah DeGuarra into that. He's been impressive since getting here. I think already you can kind of see we all were stunned when they drafted him in the 3rd round. Who? Josiah? He didn't. It was not on draft boards very high outside Lambeau Field, but you can see why he was a 3rd round pick. He's a really important scheme fit. One of the biggest differences with this offense schematically and what they've done in the last year without him, Josiah DeGuarra is a pure fullback and a pure tight end, which means that when he's in the backfield, it's a 21 look with 2 running backs, and he can just motion to flex or off the line, in line, slot, and he's a pure tight end. So all of a sudden it's a 12 look with 2 tight ends, and the defense doesn't have a chance to change its personnel or substitute a different package, and the offense has completely changed its look. So he's a really versatile piece for this Packers offense, a guy that Matt LaFleur uses a lot to disguise exactly what kind of plays they're going to run, and you can see where the fit is.
When I spoke to DeGuarra's high school coaches at Folsom High School and then his offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock at the University of Cincinnati, they all say the same thing. He's a very versatile player, even at those levels. In high school when he was a wide receiver, and then when he was more of a pure tight end in college. Head coach Matt LaFleur has lauded Josiah DeGuarra's versatility throughout camp. Now we're starting to see it translate a little bit in the regular season. We'll certainly continue to chat about him more and more as he gets more reps under his belt. Thank you there, Michael, for your question. Let's take another question here from Brian. Hello, Brian. Hope you're having a good day. Brian says, should Packers fans be concerned with the 2 drops by Marquez Valdes-Scantling? Valdes-Scantling he had, I believe, 4 catches, 2 drops, so 6 targets there. 2 of those drops came pretty early on. However, he was able to rebound later in the game. When Valdes-Scantling was asked about this past week, he said, listen, my quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, he didn't lose trust in me. He kept throwing to me, and that's what matters. How significant was his ability to rebound in that game for Valdes-Scantling's confidence?
Well, it's definitely better than the alternative and ending with those drops. You know, I wrote this today. I feel like how you perceived Marquez Valdes-Scantling's debut, his opener, almost says more about you than the opener. If you're a skeptical type, you're not going to be able to get over those 2 drops, and rightly so. They were awful drops. I mean, they were the one on 3rd down. There was no one around him. The Vikings defense had completely socially distanced themselves. There was nobody in the vicinity, and it's a 3rd round catch, and he turned upfield. I mean, you got to make that play. They go back to him on the first play of the next drive, and at the 10-yard line, there's no one there, and he's all alone, and it's a touchdown, and it clangs off his hands, kind of like a Shaq free throw. I mean, it was just there was no touch there. Those are bad drops. But then there was also the 4 catches for 96 yards, and it was he is a highlight maker when he's on the field. He is a big play threat at all times. Defenses always have to respect that size and speed because it's rare. And I think what's most striking is that the Packers, I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been unwavering in his belief in MVS, very similar to how he was with Davante Adams in 2015. I mean, it really is reminiscent of that. Davante Adams, maybe because he sees some of himself in MVS with the early season struggles, but the clear talent, he's been unwavering in his support. Matt LaFleur has been unwavering in his support. The Packers have constantly rallied around MVS despite some pretty bad drops, and it's not a coincidence because when Aaron Rodgers got the praise Sunday and Davante Adams got the headlines, but MVS was a second weapon for this offense. He was 4 yards shy of 100 yards, and when they have that second weapon, this offense, you see what happens. It's a much better offense than just Davante Adams. So there's a good reason, and like Davante Adams said, Olivia, he doesn't just put his name on anybody. I mean, there's a good reason why they have rallied around him, and it's because of the talent and because of the belief and because of the need for him to be the playmaker that he can be.
All throughout training camp, head coach Matt LaFleur, quarterback Aaron Rodgers, wide receiver Davante Adams, all lauded Marquez Valdes-Scantling for his preparation, his consistency day in and day out. We didn't really see that consistency per se on Sunday. The Packers fans, you're going to want to see that, and we'll see if he's able to continue to prove that he is able to be a consistent player on the field as the season continues. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us tonight. Thank you, as always, so much for joining us. We love to hear from you. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to PackersNews.com for all of your Packers coverage. Follow us on all of our social media channels as well. We'll have lots of updates from you out of practice, from all the press conferences, and of course, if there's any breaking news, you're going to want to make sure you're dialed in over there. For Ryan, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.